Hello, my name is Rian, and in this video, we'll be looking at 3 insights to keep your love for God strong from the book Keeping the Heart by John Flavel. I have found this book to have an interesting balance between comforting me with my fears, doubts, and my weaknesses, while at the same time confronting me with my sin, laziness, and carelessness. I really believe that if Christians simply apply the principles in this book, that they will experience a stabilizing effect in their spiritual life. So if you're a Christian who wants to know how to protect your heart better for God, or how to become more stable in your walk with God, then I think this is a book you should pick up and read. So we're simply going to look at the 3 key insights from this book on how to keep your love for God strong. One action step you can take away immediately, and then right at the end, a surprise. Let's go. So let's dive right in with the 3 insights from this book on how to keep your love for God strong. Insight number 1: the heart is the source of all you do. This book is based on one verse, Proverbs 4 verse 23, which says, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life." The proverb teaches you that the heart is the spring of life. All your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, all of it come from the true you, from your heart. Perhaps an illustration will help from another famous author, Paul David Tripp. Imagine taking a bottle of water full of water, taking off the lid and shaking it. What will come out? Water, right? Well, in the same way, when our lives are shaken up by trials, temptations, circumstances, what comes out of you, angry words, critical speech, jealousy, self-pity, etc., is what was already inside of you. So while external circumstances might have an influence on your life, what comes out of you, the final reason why you do what you do, is always your own heart. Here's an application for you. Stop blame shifting. If you always blame others for your actions, you cannot change because you don't see yourself as the problem. But the Bible teaches that the heart is the source of all you do. So as a Christian, start taking full responsibility for all your actions, your deeds, your thoughts, and your emotions. That's the first insight. The heart is the source of all you do. Insight number 2. There are 6 steps to keep your heart properly. This book has given 6 helpful steps on how, and that's found on page 18 to 21. So here's step number 1 on how to keep your heart properly. Step 1, Flavel says that you must regularly examine the true state of your heart. Regularly examine the true state of your heart. So Flavel promotes the habit of regularly talking to yourself. For example, ask yourself questions like these. What is the frame of my heart? To what am I inclined to? What excites me? What makes me sad? What do you find yourself talking about the most? When you have some time to just do what you want to do, what do you actually do? These questions will reveal your heart to you. And I love what Flavel writes on page 18 to 19. He says, there are some people who have lived 40 or 50 years in the world and have had scarcely 1 hour's discourse with their own hearts. Let that not be true of us. Personally, I've noticed sometimes by examining my heart that I have no desire to pray or to read the Bible, but only to watch YouTube or play video games. And when I found out that was the true state of my heart. Step 1, regularly examine the true state of your heart. Step number 2, Flavel says you must humble yourself over the evil and disorder of your heart. Humble yourself over the evil and disorder of your heart. When you see your heart is far from God, unwilling to love Him or others, you need to humble yourself and admit the wickedness of your heart. Page 19, he writes, saints have in their confession pointed at the heart, the pained place. Lord, here is the wound. That is how we humble ourselves. That leads us to step 3. Flavel says you must Pray for forgiveness and grace to change. Pray for forgiveness and grace to change. Notice, don't just pray for forgiveness, but also pray for the grace to stop the sin and to start doing the good. Early in the book, Flavel noted that the duty to keep our heart is ours, but the power to keep our heart is God's. We cannot keep our hearts with our own strength. We need God's strength through prayer. Listen to this beautiful prayer. Personally, this is one of my favorite quotes in this entire book. Page 19, he says, "Oh, for a better heart. Oh, for a heart to love God more, to hate sin more, to walk more evenly with God. Lord, deny not to me such a heart. Whatever thou deny me, give me a heart to fear thee, to love and delight in thee, if I beg my bread in desolate places." Personally, I remember there was a time when I knew I had to do something, but I had no desire to do it. And I just prayed and I asked God, God, give me the grace and the strength to obey you no matter how I feel. And that prayer gave me the strength I needed to do what is right. Step 3, pray for forgiveness and grace to change. Step 4, Flavel says you must then make specific plans to not do the same sins again. Make specific plans not to do the same sins again. Think of Job 31 verse 1. Flavel uses him as an example. He says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then should I gaze at a virgin? Personally, for me, I simply had to delete certain games that were constantly pulling my heart away from God, away from my family, and away from my church. I had to get covenant eyes and people in my life to keep me accountable, to protect me from pornography. This is basically in line with Jesus' commandment and counsel that if your eye makes you stumble, pluck it out. Think about that. Even something as valuable as your eye is worth losing to keep your heart. So make specific plans to not do the same sins again. So here's an application for you. What specific plans and commitments do you need to make to stop that habitual sin or habit that pulls you away from God, your family, and your church? Do you need to maybe invite certain people into your life to keep you accountable and walk a road with you? Think about that. Here's step number 5. Flavel says that you must exercise a constant jealousy over your heart. What he means by that is be constantly aware throughout the day of the temptations of your heart. Remember Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart, how? With all vigilance. Don't lose your vigilance throughout the day. Be constantly jealous over your heart. As soon as you see your heart want to walk away from sweet communion with God and walk towards sin, put it down right there and then. Kill your sin early. Flavel also uses a helpful illustration. He says, it's easier to stop a boulder rolling down a cliff at the start than it is at the bottom. In the same way, it is easier to kill your sin at its infant stages rather than at the later stages once it's gained momentum in your life and really taken root. And James 1 says, unless you kill your sin will kill you. So here's an application for you. Deal with your sin quickly. And here's the last step. Step number 6. Flavel says that you must cultivate a constant awareness of the presence of God. Cultivate a constant awareness of the presence of God. Realize this, that God is omnipresent. We know this, but we forget this. There's no place, there's no location, there's no thought, there's no motive that is not open and exposed to God's presence. That will give you a powerful incentive and motive to not sin and to stay close to your God. Personally, that last step is the one I think I fail with the most. It is really easy for me to think, God is with me in my quiet times. And then suddenly, later in the day, I'm alone now. I can do what I want without referencing God, with thinking about God and His presence with me right there and then. So the 6 steps are, number 1, regularly examine the true state of your heart. Number 2, humble yourself over the evil and disorder of your heart. Number 3, pray for forgiveness and grace to change. Number 4, make specific plans to not do the same sins again. Number 5, exercise a constant jealousy over your heart. And number 6, cultivate a constant awareness of the presence of God. And here's the final insight, the third insight to keep your love for God strong. Your heart must be kept in all seasons of life, good and bad. So again, it's implied with that, with all vigilance, that we have to keep our hearts as a constant thing in the good times and the bad times. And this is perhaps one reason why you might be struggling to keep your love for God strong, is that you might be only loving God at certain times. But you should not just love him at the easy seasons, but in all seasons. In fact, this really is the bulk of the book. From pages 35 to 106, Flavel just applies those 6 steps over and over and over and over again to the different seasons of your life. For example, he shows you how to keep your heart in times of prosperity. Think about that. If you should keep your heart at all times, you should also keep your heart when it's going well with you. For example, personally, I found this when there were little to make me anxious and everything around me was going well. What I found was that I didn't pray as much anymore. Prayed less, became lazy at my spiritual disciplines because I was not keeping my heart. So again, coming back to that final step, I forgot the presence of God at all times. So we should keep our hearts in the good times, but obviously as well, we should keep our hearts in the bad times, in the bad seasons. Seasons like suffering, persecution for our faith, sickness, and even when you are close to dying. Flavel uses all these seasons and shows us how to apply these principles. And here I will just mention, as one of you have requested in our previous video, on how to protect and keep your heart in times of suffering. So how does this look like to protect your heart from breaking loose into sin and running away from God? How do we protect our heart in love for God in times of suffering? Here I'm just going to mention a few points and summarize them really of how Flavel applies it. Number 1, remember that God is sovereign over all things. That suffering, that thing that you're going through, has come to you by God's design. Now, that might not feel very comforting, but this truth that God is sovereign even over suffering and sickness, well, coupled with the second point, is where the comfort comes. That this God, number 2, is your Father who loves you more than you love yourself. Think about that. So God, your Father, gives and puts you through suffering because he loves you. This is the teaching of the Bible. And this is where your communion with God is so important, to trust him, to know that he will fulfill Romans 8:28. That we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. Also, remember how God was faithful in previous seasons of suffering. So why will he forsake you now? Why was this suffering now going to take you away from his love or his goodness or his kindness? Remember his faithfulness in previous sufferings. And then I've already mentioned it a little bit, but rely on the precious promises of God, like Romans 8:28, and other promises that you can cling to, 2 Corinthians 1, Psalm 23. These type of psalms and verses you need to memorize and keep in your heart when you are tempted to doubt that God is good. And then lastly, focus on your duty. Focus to do what's right. In times of distress, focus, what does God want me to do right now? And then do that. Don't neglect your responsibilities as a husband, father, mother, a student, employee, etc. Focus on your duty. Personally, I just like to add that for me, the church is one of the greatest aids to help you through suffering. Personally, I've experienced this. How people were praying for me, how people were walking with me, has really helped me getting through my depression. So you need the local church. But the bottom line, the heart must be kept in all seasons of life, good and bad. So here's the one action step you can take away right away. The one action step I recommend you to do to keep your heart is to start the discipline of journaling. Yes, that's right. Take time every day, if you can, to journal about what is going on inside of your heart. This will make that first step of the 6 steps so much easier, to regularly examine the true state of your heart. Switch off your phone, switch off the TV, get alone with God in prayer and with His Word, and ask Him to search you and search your heart, and then journal, and then examine what you see and what you write in the light of Scripture. That is something you can start doing right away. And lastly, here is the surprise. You can get this book, Keeping the Heart, for absolutely free of charge. In the description box below, there's a link where you can download this book, the PDF form of this book, for absolutely free of charge. So please check it out if you'd like to have this book for yourself. Well, if that was helpful to you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and join the community by commenting in the section below. What did you find most helpful in this video? Was there anything you would add to what has been said in this video? And also, was there anything you disagreed with? Feel free to post that and to join the discussion. But until next time, may God give you the strength to keep your heart warm for Him. God bless.